Is gone. Okay. Well, today we may be looking at a turning point in the Gilgo Beach case. There are now reports that Rex Heuermann could actually change his plea to guilty. But of course, that doesn't mean there's a deal. That doesn't mean that prosecutors are agreeing to anything, because a defendant can walk into court and simply give up his defense, throw in the towel. And when that happens, the question really becomes why. So today we're going to break that all down and see how the system sees it, and what a guilty plea would actually mean, and what it could mean for the families, including Shannon Gilbert's. Well, welcome to the Margaret McLean Show. We're about to go behind the scenes, and today I'm very lucky to be joined by attorney John Ray, who represents the family of Shannon Gilbert. And he has been deeply involved in seeking answers in this case for years. John, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
It's my pleasure.
Great. So let's start out by, I'd like to know, before we get into it, help my audience understand why Shannon Gilbert's case has always stood apart from the others. Why does this case matter today?
Well, the Shannon Gilbert case is a murder case, as far as I'm concerned, and the vast majority of people who know about the case. Contrary to the Suffolk County Police Department's position that she died of a tragic accident, the proposition that they make to that effect is, on its very face, absurd. And I don't use that word often, but in this case, it works. Their whole explanation of why they think that is equally absurd. They are one of the most sophisticated homicide departments in the country, certainly one of the highest paid. And their homicide people are supposed to focus on evidence in order to convict people who are charged. So if they don't succeed in that, somebody who's a murderer walks free. So their whole lives are devoted to evidence, evidence, always evidence. And yet, in the Shannon Gilbert case, they have no evidence whatsoever. They don't even claim that they have it, secret or otherwise, as to the way that she died, or as to an accident of any kind whatsoever. They have none. And yet they declare that she died of a tragic accident, an unknown tragic accident, when the circumstances are pretty strong, like when you find a trout in the milk. And the circumstances are strong that she's murdered. She's a sex worker found along Ocean Parkway in the same stretch of land that the other sex workers were found, lined up along the other side of the parkway. The only thing that separates them is a narrow parkway. And she's also appears to have been strangled because her hyoid bone one edge has been cracked off, and the horns on the hyoid bone are both missing. Although the hyoid bone itself stayed in the same place where the body was, intact, except for the break. When the hyoid bone is broken, in the cases of women who are strangled, about 99% of the women who have been strangled have a broken hyoid bone. She had a broken hyoid bone, and I was able to acquire Dr. Michael Bodden, one of the most world-renowned medical examiners, and he examined with me the bones of Shannon Gilbert. We did an autopsy, as it were, with him and his brother, and we could see the bone, and we saw that the bone was not only cracked, but there was a hole right through the center of the U-shaped bone, right through the base of the U-shaped bone that went out the other side. That's never been found on a hyoid bone. In other words, like someone had pierced it. But in any event, start to think about that kind of evidence piling up, and all the other circumstantial evidence as well, that the people who lied about where she was that night, the false claim that she ran screaming through the neighborhood when she did not. There's a whole list of them. You and I could talk about that for at least a half an hour alone. Yeah. but the documentary evidence as well as the actual forensic evidence is overwhelmingly strong that she was murdered. She happened also to be, at the time that she disappeared, she was a cooperating witness. She was under indictment in Jersey City for prostitution and for drug dealing, and along with a whole ring of people in Jersey City who were involved in that. A fellow who is in jail in California right now ran this operation, and he got busted, and she did as well. And so she was a cooperating witness under indictment when she disappears on May 1st, 2010, Walpurgis Night, by the way,
Jeez.
the night that the witches all celebrate.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and this girl vanishes, and nobody bothers to look for her from the police department when they have a cooperating witness. It's unheard of. Something far more devious and far more than tragic is going on. Something willful, deliberate, and there's no question that there's a willful cover-up by the police department of the investigation of Shannon Gilbert, because she was the first one that triggered the investigation that found all the others.
Right.
And yet the police completely frustrated the investigation, and they were led by the Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke, a corrupt individual who his corruption was rooted in his solicitation of sex workers, one of whom he gave his gun to twice, and he got busted in rank for that. And he still manages to climb up to become the Suffolk County Police Chief. And he's associating with a street girl who he ends up getting pregnant, and they have a baby. And that was his black sex worker. He had a white one as well that lived in his house and was running a prostitution ring out of his house for
Right.
years.
And of course, they got rid of him.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Well, no, they didn't. In fact, he quashed the investigation for years. He wouldn't allow them. This is a man who is completely what's the right word? Addicted to prostitution. Mm-hmm. Who's now in charge of the investigation of the murder of 10 sex workers.
That's horrible.
And nobody noticed that there's something wrong. And then they could have caught Rex Heuermann back in 2011 without any difficulty whatsoever, because the way they caught him, they eventually did catch him. They could have done that many years ago. They just didn't do it. Right. So you know.
Until they had a change of the guard.
Correct. It's when Rodney Harrison came in as the police commissioner and Ray Tierney came in as the district attorney, there was a change of guard, and within weeks they had already put in motion the things they ought to have done back in 2011 and caught him. You know, they say, well, they caught him with the DNA. That's not accurate. They caught him first. They knew what he was doing. They knew he was the prime suspect, and the DNA was confirmatory, but they could have busted him just based on what they already knew for over 10 years. Yeah. And I mean, think about that. You know, what was it? Well, you know, people say, well, you know, he murdered all those people, and for years he was able to conceal. He must have been a genius, an evil genius. No, he was evil, but he was no genius. He was reckless. He was incredibly foolish. And yet he got away with it miraculously all those years. Yeah. It's really a freak accident that he got away with it, not the other way around.
I agree.
One proof of that is that when he goes to Amber Costello's home and she sets him up to have her boyfriend waylay him and take his money, when he goes to her home in the South Shore of Long Island, he appears himself, and he's a giant. He's a giant head, twice the size of my head.
He's huge.
He's huge, right? And he's tall, he's huge, and he goes with his Avalanche, a very unusual vehicle. Even then, when Avalanches were being, first on the market, he goes there with that, and twice he goes with his Avalanche. So the two men that were with Amber Costello in the house when he came there to solicit her services on 2 occasions, they back-to-back days, they saw him and they saw his vehicle. And they reported this later on when the police questioned them. So the police knew
Yeah.
of that. And they also knew that Heuermann, they know he's Heuermann, but he had used the cell phone of some of the dead girls to call other people. So, for example,
Yeah.
for Melissa Barthelemy, he called her half sister on her cell phone and threatened, sent horrible things to her. Are you a half breed? Are you like your sister? You had to watch your sister's face as I was killing her or strangling her. I forget what he said
Yeah.
exactly. And worse than that. And all that happened. And the police were able to trace the pings from the cell towers for that cell phone and for another one as well. Well,
Yeah.
we knew about the tracing. I knew about it years before today, and we were able to see that the tracings came from approximately Midtown Manhattan. 3 different calls, I believe, were made in different parts of Midtown Manhattan, and they followed a trail out to Massapequa Park.
Yep.
And so, how hard would it have been for the police to say, we have a giant with an avalanche living in Massapequa Park or thereabout. Let's draw a circle around Massapequa Park, or maybe parts of Massapequa or parts of North Amityville, and let's look up the number of people who own avalanches, knock on their doors, and when a giant answers, we know what we have. That's what
Absolutely.
they ended
Yeah.
up doing.
I know. And, why do you think that is, though? Like, why do you think that's because of Burke at the time?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that Burke was in complete control of that whole operation. And interestingly, now that this guilty plea is coming, it involves Burke, because we know from the news reports that leaked out of the DA's office. I think they were leaked by the DA's office. That Burke was a cooperating witness for them, because he had been busted subsequent to his imprisonment, trying to solicit sex. He wanted to give a man oral sex up in a place that's notorious for pickups of that sort in Farmingville on Long Island. So up on a hill.
Yeah.
And so he got busted for that. And he was he's still under that arrest. He's still under that charge, and he was cooperating. Now, when Heuermann pleads guilty, Burke won't have to testify.
Well,
So,
that's true.
so a lot of the circumstantial evidence that's necessary to really know the truth of what happened here, in the broadest sense, counting Shannon Gilbert, will not be heard through the questioning of witnesses and taking of testimonies and forensic evidence and the like. It goes by the boards, and you get a very truncated view of what he did when he has to be allocuted, which is a fancy legal term, as you know, for when the district attorney questions him about what did he actually do in order to say that can establish that he's guilty.
So you think the DA's office is behind this then?
No, I don't
Okay.
necessarily think so at all. As Tierney said, Heuermann can do it as he likes. If he wants to plead guilty, they can't stop him.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a deal. I can't see much room for any kind of a deal that could actually work, that wouldn't be questionable in terms of its ethics. I can't see it.
Me
Uh,
either. With all
you
the
know,
evidence. I
yeah, I
mean,
mean, they're saying, well, maybe he's making a deal so his family doesn't get prosecuted. You can't do that in a murder case. If there's families involved in that, they have to be prosecuted. You don't cut them out.
absolutely. Now, do you think the family's involved? I've seen a lot. You've been on shows before where you think that the family may be involved. I watched that docu-series, I think it was on Peacock, where of course, the family was paid $1 million to do that, and I'm sure they needed the money, but do you think at least the wife, Asa, could be involved?
Of course. I mean,
And,
just given the overwhelming circumstantial evidence that it does exist now that we know about, we don't know what the district attorney knows that he's not releasing. But certainly, they're living in a 1,400, what was it, 1,400 and some odd, 1,460 square foot house It's a
Mm-hmm.
bungalow with a basement, and you can hear everything in almost any part of that house.
Yeah.
I mean, people live in those itty bitty houses. It's crowded, okay?
Yeah.
And he lived in. Don't forget, he lived there. His wife, his daughter, and his stepson, and
Mm-hmm.
his brother. His brother lived there
Oh,
as well, up
okay.
until right before the bust went down. And supposedly other people were living there as well, all crammed into this little house. And downstairs in the basement is this steel enclosed room, enclosed by
Mm-hmm.
a door made of, I say steel, but made of metal, and it looks like a submarine kind of a you know device to
Yeah.
open the door. And it's in
Scary
that
looking.
room that the DA says that's where these murders took place. So you're killing human beings, torturing them, chopping them up in your home, and you're managing to do all that every time your family goes away on vacation, and they never come home and smell anything, see anything, notice anything. I mean, it's absurd. The whole
Yeah.
fact, to presume that is absurd. And given the wife's statements to the press, this cold-hearted woman, she and her daughter, they were like they're ghouls feeding
Mm.
on the flesh of the dead. That's what they are. To take money, to spin their own lies, spin their own stories about what they knew and didn't know on TV. Peacock is not a documentary. Peacock is a movie,
Yeah.
because these
Yeah.
people were paid actors to act out their own parts.
Yeah. And I'm
But
sure they
even
made a
then,
lot of money on it,
and
Peacock.
they made over $1 million, and their
Yeah.
lawyers were paid handsomely as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, so let's set aside the conflict of interest that raises. Um, Back to Orsa. Then she says, after she divorced him for convenience sake, so that the money could be protected,
Mm-hmm.
from lawsuits. She says, he's my hero.
Yeah. I know. It was sickening to watch that. Did you watch that? Or were you
Yeah,
just like,
yeah.
I
No,
can't do this?
he's my hero. He's your hero
I
with the
know.
dead girls in your home, and that you still consider him a hero. You can only say that if either you're completely insane or
Yeah.
you're involved in it yourself. And to you, what he did is not wrong. What he did was fine. And you can say, well, why would anybody think that? Well, take a look at the Peacock movie again, and you watch when they're interviewing Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
That the camera, of course, is showing Victoria, but it's also showing the walls inside the house. Now, this is a house that he's already been arrested in, and he's gone. He's in jail for over a year when this movie is filmed.
Right.
And still on the wall behind her is a huge wall hanging, like the curtains behind me here.
Yeah.
And it's a big picture of Baphomet, who is the statue of the devil. And
Oh,
the Church
God.
of Satan in San Francisco, that McVeigh, the fellow who was
Mm-hmm.
the head of the church, identified the Baphomet statue as a statue of the devil. They use it officially in their cult of Satan for devil worship. And she's
Oh, my
got this
God.
hanging on her wall, and
I didn't notice that. I'll have to
yeah,
go
and
back and
behind it,
watch.
look, take a look again, and behind it
Yeah.
hangs another wall hanging that you can see the edges around it of all these magical symbols. Something's going on in that house dealing with that kind of cultish behavior that involves the mother for sure. How could they have that hanging up knowing that the Peacock was going to be filmed? Because they want you to see it. These
Mm-hmm.
people they're laughing at us, aren't they? They're
Yeah.
making they're actually just flaunting what they really are. And when you take that into account, and you can see why she thinks he's a hero, is because
Yeah.
what he did was heroic in her mind.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I'll show people the picture of her if people aren't familiar. Um, let's see. Got a, right, here she is. She is kind of scary looking,
Uh,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Um,
she's into ComCon. You know, she dresses up in these costumes and goes to these conventions. And there's a lot of those conventions are not innocent. So many of them are. There's a lot of perversion going on there. She's into that. You know, everything about her. When the police broke into, used the warrant and broke into the house the second time, there was a book on the table. The only one home, she was away. Also, was the only one home was her grown adult daughter, Victoria. And that book was a book published in the late 20s, early 30s by a California policeman who went around, a detective, and took pictures of all the horrors that were committed in murders and the like, homicides of various kinds and tortures in California. There were photographs taken. You see a woman's body cut in half. You see people dismembered. And it's just a book for prurient interests. He publishes this book. That book became, for the Church of Satan, that became their Bible. And that book was made into a movie by McVeigh from the Church of Satan. He made it into a movie that he revised 3 times, a kind of a Mondo movie type thing. And it was from that book that he made that movie. That book was on their table when Victoria was home when the police came in.
Oh my gosh!
So what do you think's going on here? We're also supposed to say it's amazing at the number of people I see who write in on places like Reddit who say, "Well, my kid is involved in things like that. What's a big deal? It's just that there's plenty of goths in the world. They're just having fun."
Yeah,
right. The daughter says the other day, not too long ago, she's confronted by a reporter about, what do you think about, the murders and such, and she says, what did she call it? I'm not into kink shaming. That was her reaction.
What does that even mean?
Well, it means her father was just kinky. This was just, I don't shame him because he was kinky. So killing and slaughtering people in your house and chopping them up is just kinky. That's crazy. The kind of, there's a conscience missing in these statements by this family. And there's a desperate need to investigate them.
No, further. I agree with you. And you don't think that the police investigated them? I imagine they at least investigated the wife, Asa.
I can tell you, I'm sure they want to call it an investigation, but I have a problem with this. At the right after he was arrested back in 23 now, right after in July, after he was arrested, the district attorney at Heuermann's first court appearance put in writing a bail application to hold him without bail. In order to do that, they had to submit some of the things that they knew and explain why he's so dangerous. And so they did. And gratuitously, meaning that I'm about to tell you, they said they did not have to say. It had nothing to do with his danger or anything at all to do with him per se. They said in writing that he acted alone and that the wife and children were always on vacation when these were always elsewhere when these acts took place. And they even published a bill, a hotel bill from a time-sharing type hotel in Washington, D.C. for the period when Maureen Brainerd Barnes disappeared. The wife and children were supposedly at this hotel. And D.A. Tierney publishes that bill. It's a MasterCard bill showing the reservation and so on. He publishes that bill in support of his point that they were not there and they weren't involved in the case, showing that that from July 6th until July 14th, back in, what was it? I forgot the date exactly now, 2007 rather. Okay. They were, I could be off by a year or whatever, but from July 6th to July 14th, they were away. It was from July, she disappears July 9th. So the theory is they were gone when the slaughter takes place of that poor girl. right, in the house.
Right.
They were away, and there's proof of that. There it is. So
Yeah.
they say so. They were on vacation, and the other source of proof that he cited in his bail application was that lady on your screen, Orsa Ellerup. She told them she was there, and they believed her. That's the evidence that they had. But I called the hotel and talked to the hotel manager, and they happened to still have the records on their computer. I had 3 witnesses to the call. Unfortunately, we didn't tape it because I don't do that.
Yeah.
You're a lawyer, you're not supposed to do that.
Right.
Um, but I had 3 witnesses and put it on speaker, and the manager came on and she read off to us the details of the hotel's records that they had of her visit with the children. And she identified the person right away. As soon as we mentioned, she looked up Heuermann. There was nothing. She looked up Ellerup. Oh, she said, Asa Ellerup? That's what she called her. And she read off to us the details. And it turns out, with the help of that hotel manager's actual statement to me, that we find out they weren't they weren't in Washington, D.C. when this took place. They didn't show up until the 14th
Oh my gosh.
in Washington, D.C. And so I had to read it back to me and explain each item on the hotel bill. And she did. And she said, there's no way they were here. They could not have been. So I put that out there, when I had a little seminar about this. And immediately the 2 lawyers, one for Ellerup and the other one for the children, said, John Ray's a liar and we'll prove it. And I'm sitting here today. I
Waiting.
brought that out 2 years ago, January, and nobody's proved me a liar. And the district attorney had no comment on that issue. So something's really grievously wrong here about
Yeah.
not investigating these people.
Yeah, and you showed the investigators, right? What the hotel manager gave you. You showed them that piece of it. You published it, and they
I
didn't do
published it.
anything with it.
They never, and they were, I mean, they paid attention to what I was doing, and I never got a call, nothing. I sent it to them. I never got a return message saying, hey, no, we've investigated. No, dead end, anything like that. Nope.
Do you
So
think that is somebody are they trying to protect them? But for what reason?
I don't know. I mean, perhaps it was a judgmental call to say, look, we'll separate the 2. We don't think they're murderers, so we'll just cut them loose and we'll just focus on getting Rex. Because this was at the very beginning. How could they have known whether these women were present or not at any of these killings? Here's another reason why that needs to be thought of. When you look at some of the other indictments and you look at the facts that they did publish, they don't know exactly when these girls were killed. They only know when they disappeared. Mm-hmm. And remember, we're dealing with a torturer. Torturers keep their victims alive so they can enjoy the torture. And the longer they can do it, the more torture they can do, the more fun they're having. Okay? Right. And we know that in some of those cases that they talk about, when the girl disappeared, the family was in Iceland in one case. They were in Iceland, so they couldn't have been there when she disappeared. But they were only gone for a few days, and there's that room downstairs with the metal door where these girls kept. The cops themselves say, well, she could have been killed anywhere from July until November. Well, they weren't on vacation all that time.
No, they
were living at the home. So all these people, you don't know when they died to be able to say that the family is exonerated.
Right. Plus, there's that DNA. There's that DNA evidence too. The daughter's hair was found on one of the victims, and so is the mother's, or Ace's. So,
correct. Also, Ellerup, her hair and the child's hair were found on 3 of the different victims.
Yeah,
and
I believe so.
That's a pretty hard thing to do. And the hairs, by the way, the daughter's hair is found. One hair is found on the belt, the famous belt that's involved in this. Yeah. Others were on the skull. 2 hairs were found on the skull. The cops say, well, look, that proves that it was transference hair. It fell off of her. the child was only 3 years old when some of these murders took place. It fell off of her and went on her father, and then fell from the father on and transferred onto the bodies. How in God's name do they know that? There's not a scintilla of scientific evidence or any evidence that supports that it was transference hair. It might have been. That's a guess. That's not evidence. That's a guess.
Right.
How could we, how did we ever consider that with this cultism that's going on here, that perhaps they're revisiting the bodies? Why are they all in Ocean Parkway, in a convenient place for the Heuermann family to reach those bodies? Number one, instead of being left in Manorville or even somewhere else that they've been, because they traveled a lot. You have to ask that question. But also, we know that Heuermann himself, when he called Bartholomew, the sister, with Melissa's phone, that he talked about watching her rot as he went by. So he was watching those bodies. If he was, did he have his family with him? It's an interesting question when their hairs pop up there. Maybe the hairs didn't get there when he did the torture and the killing, but that might not have been the end of the story.
Exactly. Well, now, going to your client, do you think is she ever going to, her family, are they going to ever see justice? You talked about it a little bit in the beginning of the show, but with a possible change of plea, talk to me about your client and your client's the family.
Yeah. Well, if we use I have two clients in this case. We have Mary. Yeah, I have the estate of Mary Gilbert and the estate of Shannon Gilbert. That's one set of clients. And the other client I have is the young son of Valerie Mack. Benjamin Aaron Torres, and so he was 6 years old when his mama disappeared. And by the way, she had on her ankle. If you could see, there was real affection, a bond between him and his mother. She had a tattoo of Benjamin on her ankle. That's the tattoo that he cut off. But by the way, there's also a whole length of one of the legs missing. Why is that not there? What did they do with that? But that's another question. But it's back to the main point, which is that Benjamin suffered terribly. And when it was finally learned, when he finally learned not too long ago of how she died, he suffered immensely. Suffered, this poor guy. It's stunning what he's gone through because of what he's learned. And he loved his mother. He was only 6, and Mama didn't come home.
It's so sad.
And then we switched to Shannon's situation. Shannon was one of these people who was extraordinary in supporting her family. Even, she was in the sex work. It's not a good thing to be in, not a good thing to do.
Right.
But she was giving her money that she made from her work to her family, to support her family, and who were very poor, and including Mary Gilbert. So, Mary dies tragically because her other daughter, Sarah, slaughtered her.
Yeah, I saw that. That's
in
awful.
2016. Yeah, I became Sarah's lawyer as well in the murder charge against her and in her appeal. I did that. I do always pro bono, but I did it for them because I knew that Mary loved her and went to her death knowing, I think, that there was a real risk that was going to happen. And she went to see her daughter anyway and be with her right before the moment of death. And and she had reformed. She had been involved in various things that bothered Sarah. That Mama was practicing witchcraft, and Sarah believed there were demons that were possessing her, and that Sarah was hearing voices. All of that was a part of this. So, and it all came about in part because of the loss of Shannon, and she, Sarah couldn't get that out of her head. She loved Shannon, and Shannon was her idol, and so all these other tragedies came from it. So it's a tough, but this family members left, and I'm representing them. And, I don't know that we're trying to get justice so much as we're trying to get to the truth, which are two different things.
Yes,
you know.
absolutely. Explain what you mean by that. Some people
Well,
don't understand. They really don't. The difference
yeah,
between justice and the truth.
there's two kinds of justice. There's justice on earth and justice elsewhere in heaven.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, eternal justice is something we have nothing to do with. But on earth, we have earthly justice, which is imperfect, and it's dry, and it's cold. It's a goddess in a way, a very cold marble statue goddess, as we know when we see the goddess holding the scales blindly. Justice, therefore, has a very narrow, very narrow parameters, and can only have very narrow results. You're guilty, you're not guilty legally. Many times we know people are found not guilty when they are guilty.
Sure.
But the law and the system says that's justice. We know that justice is therefore imperfect by a long stretch. Well, that's very different than achieving justice is a societal goal, but an individual goal is to know the truth. And the truth is far greater than and wider and more complicated by far than mere justice. And it's the truth that we really need. And I always argue this. I know it's perhaps philosophical, but if we believe that you as a being are not just your physical self, the meaning of you is something more than your body. If that were not true, then cutting these girls up would be nothing but an incident. But yourself is more than that, and you still exist when you're dead. Your self still exists, your soul.
Yep.
And the soul, in the cases of these girls, their souls cry out for truth, and they cannot be given the mercy of God that they really need and deserve without first having caused the truth to have been exposed. So there's a much greater effort going on here that's on the spiritual as well as the physical level. And Shannon needs the truth so Shannon can have mercy.
Yeah.
And that's true of all these others.
Yeah. Do you think that Shannon will ever receive the truth? Or the family will ever receive the truth? I mean, she's not listed as one of the victims in this case. Will she ever be included?
It's hard to know what the police will do. I'm fighting them still in court as we speak.
Good.
They're in court. We're battling over I'm trying to get the records. I think I'm being denied by the court right now. I think we just found out we had our subpoenas quashed, but we didn't give up, and we're still going on the case for Shannon. And as far as Benjamin is concerned, as we speak, before I get on here today, and my staff, we're drafting a complaint to bring against Heuermann and his family for the horrible things that happened, and to try to recoup some of the money that they've received. I'm not getting a penny. If
I believe,
we get any money at all, Benjamin gets it. I don't. But we're not giving up. We're going after the truth.
Good.
And they look. These people, these girls, they did wrong. They did serious wrong in being in the sex work industry and indulging in all those things and God knows what else. But they didn't get there by themselves. And you're a lawyer and you're sitting there nicely in a nice office, as am I.
Right.
We didn't grow up like they did. We didn't have the circumstances they had. Shannon spent her whole childhood in various foster homes, bouncing from home to home, and at the same time trying to stay in the affection of her mother. Well, all her youth was destroyed. She had no chance. She stood no chance whatsoever. As far as Benjamin is concerned, his mother's a sex worker. She was home sometimes. Other times she wasn't. This young fella had no chance in life, if a narrow chance, which very few people can endure. So look upon them with some mercy and say, wait a minute, they deserve what more I can give, because I understand that. Mary Magdalene was reputed to be a prostitute, and she was given the right to stand at the foot of the cross and at the grave of Jesus when he rose. If you believe that, if you're a Christian, you believe that. The other most famous saint is the good thief on the cross.
Oh, that's
and
right.
He was the first one into heaven.
Speaking of that, on Easter weekend here, as we're coming into that,
So I say that because we run an operation called the Magdalene Dismas Legal Services Society, and I invented it, and I named it after those two saints for that reason, because we help people like Shannon Gilbert. We help people who were buried alive by the circumstances of society and by the system and by the institutions. And that's the pro bono system under which I work.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for your work. That's just wonderful. So do you think that the victims, I know you can't speak for all of them, but do you feel that some people are upset online? I've seen that, they'd like to see a trial. They feel that they'd like to see the evidence and how much the government has against Rex Heuermann. What do you think about the idea, if he does plead, changes his plea from not guilty to guilty, what do you have to say about that for all the people that feel almost like a Kohlberger thing, that they feel, well, now we're not going to be able to really see the trial and see, justice working?
Justice is working, and his plea of guilty is if he takes it, if he does go forward with it, it's really what the justice system wants. It's the ultimate result. It's the result. It's not the circumstances. It's the result that they're looking for. And justice is then so narrowly defined, isn't it? That
it is.
He says, up, I did it. And then he has to allocate to some of the circumstances, but only enough that he can then be found guilty of murder. So you're right. All the other facts and circumstances that would have come out at trial, which are vastly wider, will not be heard. And we may never know them. And that's a problem. I agree. There's nothing you or I or anybody else can do about that, not even the DA. If this fellow pleads guilty, says, I want to do it of my own free will, and he can establish, after being questioned, that it is his free will to make that choice, that's it. So what's left? What's left then is that I'm going forward to continue to pry into the truth through the legal system as best I can, using lawsuit such as the one I'm now preparing.
Okay, good.
Then maybe we'll get some more evidence. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and good luck with that. And I'd definitely have you back on to talk about that if you can, because we do want the truth for Shannon Gilbert and for the other victims. And there may be, he was killing for decades, maybe 30 years or so before he was even married. So, how many other victims were there?
We don't know. I do know this. I've been at this case now since 2011. So, that's 15 years, right?
Yeah.
And we can estimate in this office that we've put in roughly anywhere from 30,000 to 50,000 hours of firm time. That's like a 40 to 60 hours a week, every week, just about. But that's what we've done to work on this case. You would not believe how much information I've garnered. But I point that out because part of my job is that people call me all the time. It's every week I get sometimes floods of calls from people who say, I'm a victim of Rex Heuermann, or I know about Rex Heuermann, or I've got evidence and so on. And the vast majority of those people, it doesn't, it doesn't work out. They're not, they believe what they believe, but it's not likely. And, they're paranoid. My husband did it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I give them all respect. They deserve that just as much as any of the victims do. They deserve that respect. They're trying to help and get to the truth. So I listen to them patiently, and it uses up a lot of time, but it's worth it, because then also mixed in amongst them are the people who are credible. And the ones I found credible, we've had people from Florida, Carolina, North Carolina, several from Virginia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York City, upstate New York, Massachusetts, Arizona, Las Vegas, Anchorage, Alaska, where Rex Heuermann had some interest in going to those places and actually did go there, and we know he went there. The good example is Anchorage, Alaska. You'd say, what? Wait a minute. Well, he got himself a hunting permit there. And his sister-in-law, Osa's sister, who was also involved in she involved in something called Druidism, and there's some Danish cult that she's involved in. But she had a place in Anchorage, Alaska, and his brother had a phone number set up in Anchorage, Alaska. We haven't been able to tie them together in one house, but they all had this connection to Anchorage, Alaska. And there are 3 serial killers that came out of Anchorage, Alaska, if you count Rex as well. So one of them who was convicted recently, named Hansen, who had a pattern of behavior very similar to Rex Heuermann's. In any event, there are well over 100 missing girls in Anchorage, Alaska. Many of them, poor girls who were, Native American girls. So what's his connection there? We'll find out. We'll try anyway. All these people call me, and many of them do have legitimate stories. And, I've turned them over, the stories, to the police. I don't know whatever happened to most of them, but what investigation was done and how, I don't know. I'm not a policeman, so. But they do. There are plenty of people all over. It stretches from Massachusetts all the way across the country to Alaska and down to Florida. His journeys all to various places. He was very peripatetic guy, and he, if you listen to some of these girls' stories, they're telling the truth, and it was him. And it's very hard for them to forget.
Well, the big hulking guy and all that.
So.
And speaking of that, we just this week, DNA confirmed one of Bundy's victims going back to the 1970s, and so that case was closed. So maybe there will be more. They'll use the DNA, and hopefully, if there are more victims out there across the United States, then hopefully they can connect them to Rex Heuermann if he.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you listen to some of these women, I mean, that appear to be accurate and telling the truth, there's a commonality in some of their stories which you couldn't really pick up from a TV. It comes in very strange little ways, but you get the impression that he really was a hunter. He was hunting. He would stalk these girls. He would hunt them. This was he was very into stalking people, even people who he didn't kill, or even people who weren't, who were men. He stalked. This was his thing. He was a hunter, and you get that real flavor. That's what he did in, say, for example, in Virginia. So the chances are pretty strong that he's murdered in other places.
Oh yeah, I bet. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Well, I thank you very much for coming on the show and for enlightening the audience. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I don't want to keep you too long.
That's okay. If I'm overstaying my time, forgive me. There's so
Oh
much
no,
involved in this.
I could keep going on and on. This case has fascinated me for years, and I was very upset with the whole police investigation with Burke that you talked about. I felt like there was never going to be closure in the case until, he was finally arrested, which
Yeah.
was amazing. And now this big news comes down, so we'll have to wait till April 8th. Will you be in court on April 8th?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll be at the courthouse. I have not been invited in yet.
Yeah.
We've told them that I'm coming with with
Yeah.
Benjamin. So
You've got a
let's see.
victim's family member,
Yeah.
although she's not in the case. So, okay.
Well, Benjamin is a direct
Oh, that's right. Okay.
victim.
Right.
So
He is. So
let's see
they
how
should let
they.
you in.
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'll be
the
watching,
the
and
police are clever.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I've had a good relationship. I mean, Rodney Harrison, for example, the police commissioner, and
Yep.
he came to my office and he insisted that we hold a press conference and that he announced at the press conference that we were in a partnership, basically an informal one, where he said, if anybody is afraid of the police, doesn't want to talk to them for this reason or that, fear, has a resistance to police, call John Ray. He said that. So I had a good
Wow.
relationship with the police.
Yeah.
And even though I very skeptical of what happened under the regime of Burke
Yeah.
and some of his cohorts. That
Oh,
was
God,
then,
yeah.
this is now. And,
Yeah.
I hope they respect the work I've done.
I think they should. And I know that on people out there, the true crime community respects the work you've done.
Well,
Well, I
thank you.
do. I definitely
You're
do.
part of the crime community.
Yeah, I am kind of a newer part of the crime community here, but I really appreciate again you coming on and all the work that you do for the victims and their families, and keep up the hard work. So appreciate it.
All right. I appreciate being
And
on. Nice.
great. Well, thank you, and enjoy your weekend. I know it's only Thursday, but enjoy your Easter weekend.
It starts now, right? Doesn't it? Sort of.
It starts
So,
now. Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, thank you very much.
all
And
right.
for everybody that has watched the show, we appreciate it. And I'm Margaret McLean. This is the Margaret McLean Show. I'm your courtroom translator. So, and thank you very much for joining us today, Attorney
Margaret, I
Ray.
appreciate it. I
Okay.
enjoyed being with you. Okay.
Yeah, enjoyed being with you too. Thank you.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye. There, I just ended.